Hi everybody, welcome to Tuesday of this week. I'm going to read two books today by the same author, same illustrator. One of them though is a really old-time book, a really old-time story I should say, that was written long before the author and illustrator put it into this book. So the way that we know that is instead of saying written and illustrated by, it says retold and illustrated by Jan Brett, because the story has been told many times over the years, and she has just done her own version of it with her own illustrations. And it's Goldilocks and the Three Bears, and you have heard this story lots of times and have seen it probably illustrated in lots of different ways. But I'm going to read this one, and then after this I'll read another one by Jan Brett called The Three Snow Bears, and they are very similar. We've read both of them, but there are also some big differences, and so I want you to be thinking about both things. I want you to think about things that are the same in the stories, and I also want you to think about things that are different. So that's your job today, is to try to think of both of those things when you're listening to both of the stories. The first is Goldilocks and the Three Bears, retold and illustrated by Jan Brett. Once upon a time, there were three bears who lived together in a house on their own in a wood. One of them was little, wee, small. One was a middle-sized bear, and the other was a great, huge bear. They each had a bowl for their porridge. Porridge is a little bit kind of like oatmeal, a breakfast cereal that's hot and kind of liquid. If you've ever had something called cream of wheat, it might be more similar to that, not as big chunks as oatmeal has. There was a little bowl of porridge for the little small wee bear, a middle-sized bowl of porridge for the middle-sized bear, and a great big huge bowl for the great huge bear. And they each had a chair to sit in, a little chair for the little small wee bear, a middle-sized chair for the middle-sized bear, and a great huge chair for the great huge bear. And they each had a bed to sleep in, a little bed for the little small wee bear, a middle-sized bed for the middle-sized bear, and a great huge bed for the great huge bear. One day, after they'd made their porridge for breakfast, they poured it into the porridge bowls. They walked out into the woods while the porridge was cooling. So it was too hot, so they took a walk for it to cool. And while they were walking, a little girl named Goldilocks came to their house. First, she looked in at the window, and then she peeped at the keyhole, and seeing that no one was at home, she lifted the latch. The door opened, and in she went. How pleased Goldilocks was when she saw the steaming porridge on the table. The sweet smell of the porridge with roasted nuts, honey, and berries filled the room. It was so tempting that Goldilocks set about helping herself. That's just kind of an old-fashioned fancy way of saying she decided to help herself. When you set about to do something, it means you go ahead and decide to do it, and then you do it. First, she tasted the porridge of the great huge bear, but it was too hot. Then she tasted the porridge of the middle-sized bear, but it was too cold. And then she tasted the porridge of the little small wee bear, and it was neither too hot nor too cold. It was just right. She liked it so much that she ate it all up. Then Goldilocks sat down in the chair of the great huge bear, but it was too hard for her. Then she sat in the chair of the middle-sized bear, but it was too soft for her. And then she sat down in the chair of the little small wee bear, and this chair was neither too hard nor too soft, but just right. So Goldilocks seated herself in it, and there she sat until the bottom of the chair gave way, and down she came, plump right upon the floor. Then Goldilocks went upstairs to the bedroom in which the bears slept. First she lay down upon the bed of the great huge bear, but that was too high at the head for her. Next she lay down upon the bed of the middle-sized bear, but that was too high at the foot for her. And then she lay down upon the bed of the little small wee bear, and that was neither too high at the head nor too high at the foot, but just right. So she covered herself up comfortably and she fell fast asleep. By this time, the three bears thought their porridge would be cool enough to eat, so they returned home for breakfast. Now, Goldilocks had left the spoon in the great huge bear, standing in his porridge. "Somebody's been at my porridge," said the great huge bear in his great rough, gruff voice. And when the middle-sized bear looked at hers, she saw that the spoon was standing in it, too. "Somebody's been at my porridge," said the middle-sized bear in her middle voice. And then the little small wee bear looked at his bowl, and the spoon was in the porridge bowl, but the porridge was all gone. "Somebody's been at my porridge and has eaten it all up," said the little small wee bear in his little small wee voice. Upon this, the three bears, seeing that someone had entered their house and eaten up little small wee bear's breakfast, began to look about them. Now, Goldilocks had not put the hard cushion straight when she rose from the chair of the great huge bear. "Somebody's been sitting in my chair," said the great huge bear in his great rough, gruff voice. And Goldilocks had crumpled the soft cushion of the middle-sized bear. "Somebody's been sitting in my chair," said the middle-sized bear in her middle-sized voice. And you know what Goldilocks had done with the third chair? Remember, it was broken. "Somebody's been sitting in my chair and has sat the bottom right out of it," said the little small wee bear in his little small wee voice. And then the bears thought it necessary that they should make a further search. So they went upstairs to their bedroom. Now, Goldilocks had pulled the pillow of the great huge bear out of its place. "Somebody's been lying in my bed," said the great huge bear in his great rough, gruff voice. And Goldilocks had pulled the cover of the middle-sized bear out of its place. "Somebody's been lying in my bed," said the middle-sized bear in her middle-sized voice. And then the little small wee bear came to look at his bed, and there was Goldilocks, sleeping peacefully, her long, shiny braids spread across his pillow. Little small wee bear just stared at her for a moment and didn't say anything. But then he cried, "Somebody's been lying in my bed, and here she is." Goldilocks had heard in her sleep the great, rough, gruff voice of the great huge bear and the middle-sized voice of the middle-sized bear, but it was only as if she had heard someone speaking in a dream. But when she heard the little small wee voice of the little small wee bear, it was so sharp and so shrill and so like her own that it awakened her at once. I want to talk real quickly about how she describes the little bear's voice. She says it's sharp and shrill, and both of those words she's using to describe his voice. Sharp isn't a word that you would normally hear to describe the way someone sounds when they talk. That's more a word that you might be familiar with when we're talking about a knife or something that's broken. Sometimes it has a sharp edge on it. So when you think about a sharp edge, you can take that thought and apply it to the way someone's voice sounds, and it's a way that you can describe it. When you hear someone talking and it really goes right into your ears like a sharp sound, then that's a way that you can imagine what you can imagine it means to use the word sharp to describe a voice. The other thing is that sharp is the way that music sounds sometimes. It's another way to describe a musical note, a sharp note. And shrill is a word that describes kind of a really high, like a screaming type noise would be shrill, and it kind of sends like little goosebumps up your spine sometimes. And so that's what the little small wee bear's voice sounded like to Goldilocks, and it woke her right up. Up she started, and when she saw the three bears on one side of the bed, she tumbled herself out of the other side and ran to the window. Out Goldilocks jumped and ran away as fast as she could run, not looking behind her until she was very far away. And what happened to Goldilocks afterwards? No one can really tell. But the three bears never saw anything more of her. So, problem solved. All they had to do was be there when she woke up, and she was so afraid that she ran away. So that's the original. That's the years and years and years old story of Goldilocks and the Three Bears. And again, it was just retold by Jan Brett, not written by Jan Brett. She didn't make up the story. She did make up the next story that I'm going to read. It's called The Three Snow Bears. You'll notice that she's absolutely using the idea from Goldilocks and the Three Bears to write this story, and that's what lots and lots of artists and authors do, is they get inspiration for their work by listening to or looking at someone else's work. It happens with books and writing. It happens with music. It happens with paintings. Artists are inspired by the work of other people over time and throughout history, and that's definitely what's happening with this story, The Three Snow Bears. I love the illustrations in this one. They're super beautiful. Written and illustrated by Jan Brett. Again, think about things that are the same and think about things that are different. We're going to compare as we read. "Come back!" Aluki shouted as her huskies floated out to sea. Oh no. She knew that although an ice floe is a good place to fish, it's a bad place to lose a dog team. Not far away, a snow bear family had just started to eat their breakfast, but it was way too hot for Baby Bear. "Owie!" yowled Baby Bear. "My breakfast burned my mouth." "We'll go for a stroll and let the soup cool," Mama Bear said. Aluki was running along looking for her dogs when she came upon the biggest igloo she had ever seen. Who lives here? She wondered. Now, the side illustrations in this story are telling what the other characters are doing. So while we're hearing about Aluki and what she's doing, we're watching what the bears are doing while they are waiting for their porridge to cool. So it's not showing necessarily what's going to come next. It's telling a whole nother story just through the pictures. Here's what we're doing with Aluki and the igloos. Here's what the animals are doing at the same time. Aluki ducked inside. Right away, she smelled something delicious. Across the room, she saw a big bowl, a middle-sized bowl, and a small bowl. Surely the good smell was coming from the three bowls. Aluki took a sip from the biggest bowl. "Ow!" she cried out. "Too hot." She took a sip from the middle-sized bowl. "Ew! Too cold." She tipped up the littlest bowl and drank every drop. She said. "Not too hot or too cold." In the next room, Aluki spotted 3 pairs of beautiful boots, all standing in a row. She put on the biggest boot. "Too big," she said. She put on the middle-sized boot. "Too fancy," she said. She put on the littlest pair. "Just right," she said, wiggling her toes in the soft fur lining. Aluki walked into the last room and found a long sleeping bench piled high with fur covers. Heat from an oil lamp warmed her cheeks and made her sleepy. Time for a nap, she thought. She crawled under the highest mound of covers. "Too lumpy," she grumbled. She tried the middle bed with the furry fringe cover, but sat down so far that she could hardly breathe. "Too soft," she said. She rolled over on the smallest sleeping place. The furry blanket was cozy and warm, and the pillow was just her size. "Just right," Aluki murmured, and she was asleep before she could even take her boots off. If Aluki hadn't fallen fast asleep, she might have heard her dogs barking happily. Papa Bear, Mama Bear, and Baby Bear had spotted them drifting in the strong current, and they had gone out to save them. The Snow Bear family was pushing Aluki's dog team right back toward their igloo and safety. So look at the whole family saving Aluki's dogs. Papa Bear crawled into the igloo and saw his big bowl sitting in a pool of spilled soup. "Someone has been tasting my soup," he roared. Mama Bear rushed in and saw that her soup had been sloshed around too. "Someone's been sipping my soup," she growled. "Someone found my soup," sputtered Baby Bear in her high, squeaky voice. "And they ate it all up." Papa Bear ran into the next room and saw his boots in the middle of the floor. "Someone's been trying on my boots," he boomed in his big bear voice. Mama Bear put on her fancy boots. "Someone's had these boots on," she huffed, "and the fur is all bunched up." Baby Bear saw that her boots had disappeared. "Someone's taken my boots and left behind these not as good ones," she wailed. In that case, wailed means to cry. It's not like a whale that swims in the ocean. It's a whale that's spelled differently and means something different. Sounds the same, means something different. That's called a homophone, a word that sounds the same and means something different. The bears ran into their bedroom. "Someone's been sleeping in my bed," Papa Bear bellowed. "Someone's been sleeping in my bed too," Mama Bear cried. Baby Bear peeked at her little bed and squeaked. "Someone's been sleeping in my bed and here she is." Aluki opened her eyes and saw 3 bears' noses only inches away. That might be pretty scary. She hopped out of bed and dove between Papa Bear's huge furry legs. Quicker than a seal, Aluki ran from room to room until she burst outside. Her huskies bounced around, barking and smiling their doggy grins. Aluki and her dogs flew over the frozen ice, dodging ridges and cracks. She looked back to wave a thank you to the snow bears. She couldn't see them, but she heard a big, gruff voice, a middle-sized voice, and a high, squeaky voice calling to her. Bye-bye. 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 And that's the end. So again, if you think about the things that are the same, the similarities between the two stories, you'll find a lot. And if you think about some of the things that are different, then that's what you do when you compare two things. You think about the similarities and the differences, and there are a lot to discuss in those two stories. So I hope you liked them, and I hope you have a great day. See you tomorrow.